pathological a-hole gets what's coming to him, a twisted tale of betrayal, revenge, and karma in Los Angeles. Hey Reddit, this is a long one. I've kept this story bottled up for years, but today feels like the right time to share it. It's a roller coaster ride of betrayal, lies, revenge, and karma, all unfolding in the chaotic backdrop of Los Angeles. Grab a drink, settle in, and let me tell you how a pathological liar named Sammy came into my life, tried to destroy me, and how the universe, with some help from me, took care of him in the end. Backstory: a hustle in the City of Angels. A few years ago, I was just a guy trying to make something of himself in the private security industry. Los Angeles is one of the busiest cities in the world when it comes to events, concerts at the Staples Center, packed games at Dodger Stadium, and festivals in every park from Santa Monica to Pasadena. If there was a crowd, there was a need for security, and I was right in the middle of it all, trying to climb the ladder. I had dreams of becoming a security supervisor, so I enrolled in a local training academy while working gigs on the side to make ends meet. The company I worked for wasn't glamorous. It was a small, family-run outfit that mostly handled low-key events like community concerts and high school sports games. The paychecks were far from luxurious, but it was honest work, and the camaraderie made it bearable. My co-workers were a mix of people from all walks of life: college students, blue-collar workers picking up extra hours, and older folks who had been in the business for decades. We bonded over shared frustrations, long shifts, and late-night fast food runs. But LA is an expensive city, and money was always tight. I couldn't afford top-tier gear, so I relied on second-hand vests, budget pepper spray, and boots that felt like they were on their last leg. I figured I'd upgrade once I started making more money. But LA has a way of throwing curveballs, and my biggest one came in the form of Sammy. Sammy, the con artist. Sammy was the kind of guy who could charm his way into any situation. He wasn't flashy or overconfident. He had a subtler kind of charisma. He made you feel like he understood you, like he was one of the good ones. But as I learned the hard way, Sammy was a master manipulator, and his charm was nothing more than a tool he used to get what he wanted. He was just another security worker when I first met him, clocking in and out like the rest of us. At first glance, he seemed like a stand-up guy. He'd crack jokes during shifts, share tips about the industry, and even buy coffee for the team after particularly rough nights. Everyone liked him. One afternoon, he pulled me and a couple of my coworkers aside during a break. "You guys are still using that second-hand gear?" he asked, shaking his head like he couldn't believe it. "Man, I've got a hookup. Top-of-the-line equipment, brand new, and way cheaper than anything you'll find online." We were skeptical, but Sammy's reputation was solid at the time. He was one of us, after all. Why would he screw us over? So, against our better judgment, we handed over the cash. I gave him $350, money I couldn't really spare but figured was an investment in my future. Sammy promised the gear would arrive in 2 weeks. In hindsight, that was my first mistake. The first signs of trouble. While we waited for our equipment, Sammy started throwing other opportunities my way. "Hey," he said one day as we wrapped up a shift, "I've got this bouncer gig lined up at a club in Hollywood. It's easy money, just stand at the door, check IDs, and keep an eye out for trouble. You in?" Hollywood nightlife wasn't exactly my scene, but the pay sounded decent, so I agreed. The gig was uneventful for the most part, just a few drunk guys trying to sneak in with fake IDs and some heated arguments between clubgoers that didn't amount to much. Sammy handled the money at the end of the night, but when he handed me my cut, it was half of what he'd promised. "Middleman fee," he said with a shrug, as if it was obvious. I was annoyed but let it slide. I figured it was still better than nothing, and I didn't want to rock the boat. A week later, Sammy approached me with another offer: security work at the LA County Fair. "This one's big," he said, his eyes lighting up. "They're paying top dollar, and I'm the head of security. You'll be working directly under me. Trust me, this is easy money." The fair was anything but easy. The crowds were massive, the shifts were long, and our team was woefully understaffed. Still, I powered through, thinking about the paycheck waiting for me at the end. But when the fair ended, Sammy was nowhere to be found. No paycheck, no explanation, just radio silence. That's when I started digging. The truth comes out. I decided to call the organizers of the county fair directly, despite Sammy's insistence that I'd let him handle it. What I found out left me furious. Sammy hadn't been hired as head of security. In fact, the fair hadn't hired any private security at all. They'd partnered with a volunteer group of retired officers who worked for free. Sammy had volunteered with them and then recruited me and a few others by promising pay he had no intention of delivering. I was livid. Between the unpaid fair gig and the bouncer middleman fees, I'd lost over $350 in a single week, money I desperately needed. But Sammy wasn't done screwing me over yet. The ultimate betrayal. Around this time, I took on a trucking job through a side business run by my security company. It was straightforward work: pick up deliveries, drop them off, and stick to the schedule. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and I needed the income. Then, one day, everything went wrong. My delivery route was completely messed up. Packages were late, clients were furious, and I was called into the manager's office to explain myself. "This is unacceptable," my boss said, his voice cold. "We can't afford mistakes like this. You're fired." I was stunned. I knew I hadn't made any mistakes, but the evidence was stacked against me. As I left the office, still trying to process what had happened, I ran into Sammy in the hallway. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, with that smug smirk on his face, the kind that makes your blood boil. "Oh, you lost your job," he said, feigning sympathy. "Man, that's rough. Guess that's what happens when you F*** with the wrong people." It turned out Sammy had been hired for the trucking job shortly before me. He was in charge of assigning routes and had deliberately sabotaged mine to get me fired. I was beyond furious, but there was nothing I could do. It was his word against mine, and Sammy had played his cards perfectly. Years later, the opportunity. Time passed, and I slowly rebuilt my life. I landed a job with a larger, more reputable security firm and worked my way up the ladder. By the time I was assigned to train new hires, Sammy was just a bitter memory, a lesson in how cruel and calculated people could be. Then, one day, I met Jay. Jay was a fresh-faced recruit, eager to learn and full of stories about his side hustles. During a lunch break, he casually mentioned he was working part-time for a small security company run by someone named Sammy. I froze. Could it really be the same Sammy? Jay confirmed it. Sammy had started his own unregistered security company, employing a small team and running everything through a private Facebook group. He was still pulling the same scams, promising big paydays and delivering nothing. It was time for revenge. The plan. Jay and I started gathering evidence. Over the next few weeks, he collected screenshots of messages, photos of falsified pay stubs, and statements from Sammy's employees. The picture that emerged was even worse than I'd imagined. Sammy wasn't just skimming wages, he was outright stealing, pretending to handle taxes and pensions while pocketing the money. I took the evidence to Sammy's clients first. Armed with undeniable proof, I exposed him for the fraud he was. One by one, they dropped him. Then, I handed everything over to the police and the IRS. Between tax evasion, falsified documents, and running an unregistered business, Sammy's empire crumbled overnight. The fallout. Sammy's downfall was spectacular. He was fined tens of thousands of dollars, hit with legal fees, and sentenced to probation. The LA security community, a tight-knit group, blacklisted him. His name became synonymous with dishonesty, and his career was effectively over. But karma wasn't done with him yet. Karma's final blow. A year later, I heard Sammy had reinvented himself yet again, this time as the owner of an ATV tour company. It seemed fitting. Karma's final blow continued. A year later, I heard Sammy had reinvented himself, this time as the owner of an ATV tour company. It seemed fitting for someone like him to pivot to something entirely unrelated, trying to outrun his reputation. Word had it he was leading group tours up in the Angeles National Forest and charging premium fees for memberships in his exclusive ATV club. At first, I couldn't believe it. Sammy, who barely knew how to keep a job or run a legitimate business, was now managing a fleet of ATVs. The idea was laughable, but the scammer in him had always been resourceful. According to some mutual acquaintances, Sammy was pulling the same shady tricks, pocketing membership fees, overcharging for rentals, and promising services he never delivered. Then came the incident. During one of his exclusive ATV safaris, Sammy decided to show off. According to witnesses, he sped ahead of the group, taking a dangerous trail that wasn't marked on the map. It was the kind of reckless move you'd expect from someone who thought they were untouchable. But karma was waiting for him at the next turn. Sammy lost control of his ATV while trying to navigate a sharp bend. He flipped the vehicle, which sent him flying several feet into the rocky terrain. The crash was brutal. He fractured multiple vertebrae in his spine, broke his collarbone, and suffered a concussion. The injuries left him hospitalized for months. When he finally emerged, he was a shadow of his former self, walking with a cane and visibly in pain with every step. The final encounter. I didn't hear about Sammy's accident right away. It wasn't until a mutual connection brought it up during a casual conversation that I learned about his new career and its spectacular failure. Part of me was curious to see what had become of him, so I did some digging. Turns out, Sammy's ATV company had gone under shortly after the crash. Customers demanded refunds for canceled safaris, and word spread that he was unfit to lead tours. His mounting medical bills only added to his financial ruin. A few months later, I ran into him at a local coffee shop. I almost didn't recognize him. The once cocky, smooth-talking Sammy now looked frail and withered, leaning heavily on a cane as he shuffled to the counter. When he saw me, his face froze. For a moment, I thought he might try to weasel his way out of the situation, but instead, he just nodded silently and limped out the door without saying a word. Watching him walk away, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. Sammy's downfall had been years in the making, and while I played my part, karma had delivered the final blow. Reflection, the cost of betrayal. Looking back, the entire saga feels surreal. Sammy's lies cost me time, money, and a great deal of stress, but in the end, I came out stronger. I built a successful career, earned the respect of my peers, and learned a valuable lesson about trusting the wrong people. As for Sammy, he's a walking cautionary tale, a reminder that no matter how clever or charming someone may seem, the truth always catches up with them. TLDR, Sammy, a pathological liar and con artist in LA's security world, scammed me, sabotaged my career, and ruined countless lives. Years later, I exposed his illegal activities, leading to his financial and professional downfall. Karma delivered the final blow when he crashed his ATV, leaving him permanently injured and out of work. Sometimes, justice takes time, but when it arrives, it's oh so satisfying. Oh, you lost your job? That's what happens when you F* with the wrong people. This moment highlights Sammy's audacity and malicious intent, adding a shocking twist to the betrayal. Sammy had been hired for the trucking job shortly before me and was in charge of assigning routes. He had deliberately sabotaged mine to get me fired. This reveals the depth of Sammy's manipulation and how far he was willing to go to ruin someone's livelihood.